Good afternoon and welcome to this year's IDM Rollout webinar. My name is Mary Foster. I'm a managing engineer in the Office of the City Engineer in Houston Public Works, responsible for the city's infrastructure design manual, standard construction specifications, and standard details. I want to thank you all for joining us, and I hope today's webinar is informative. I'd like to thank all of our internal partners within Houston Public Works and the Planning Department for their participation in this year's review cycle. And I'd like to thank all of our external partners for their feedback. The results of this collaboration can be seen in the numerous updates made to the standards. In addition to presenting the standard changes in today's webinar, we'll also be accepting questions. We will be taking questions via chat. Please place your questions in the chat box as the presentation is ongoing. We have several presentations today and will be allowing time for answering questions at the end of each presentation. We have a team that will select the most applicable questions to address. Any questions we do not get to will be addressed after the webinar and posted online. Before I get started, I'd like to highlight Houston Public Works' purpose, which is together we create a strong foundation for Houston to thrive, and our 5 to Thrive values of respect, ownership, communication, integrity, and teamwork. All of these values have been instrumental in updating this year's standards. If you're not familiar with the team's live event environment, this slide provides a quick guide. Select the Q&A icon on the right side of the screen and select the Ask a Question box near the bottom of the screen to ask your question. Under the Q&A feature tab, you will find all attendee questions. Under the My Questions tab, you will find only the questions you've submitted. When you type your questions, note the IDM chapter and topic to give your question context. Before I present an overview of the updates made during the 2022-2023 review cycle, here is a quick overview of Houston Public Works design and construction standards. The city's infrastructure design manual, construction specifications, and the standard details provide minimum requirements for design and construction of the city's infrastructure that is operated and maintained by Houston Public Works. The IDM specifications and standard details communicate what the city needs and captures lessons learned. It's my team's responsibility to lead this effort with the support of various stakeholders within Houston Public Works, other city departments, and external stakeholders. For those of you who may not know, the Office of the City Engineer is tasked with ensuring the city's ordinances, design manual, and standards are carried out in the city's right-of-way. The City Engineer's Office sees several hundred sets of plans a week for review, so we're in a good position to identify problems within our standards and develop solutions. Today's webinar includes multiple presentations from city employees. We'll only be touching on the major changes to the standards. This agenda is provided in the webinar announcement if you'd like to keep track of the presentations as we progress. We'll do our best to follow this schedule so attendees can rely on when a subject matter will be presented. I'll start with a quick overview of the review cycle process. I'd like to point out that an executive summary was released with this year's IDM. It includes a summary of the changes as well as implementation of the changes. This can be found at the front of the IDM. Per current policy, each chapter in the IDM will be reviewed at least once in 5 years. The city has a review schedule that is posted on the website. The associated standard drawings and construction specifications are to be reviewed in conjunction with each chapter being reviewed. This year's review cycle included chapters 15 through 18, along with the associated construction specifications and details. There is a process to address significant issues within our standards outside of the designated review year. However, care is needed to ensure all stakeholders are informed and changes have been properly vetted. A good example of this would be this year's changes to chapters 9 and 10 of the IDM. Also, changes prior to publishing can be made with the use of a supplement. The city did not have any supplements this year, but has in previous years. Supplements, once properly vetted, must be signed by the city engineer and the director. Once a supplement is signed and put into effect, my team works to implement these updates and notify the community. Establishing the website, the distribution list, and this webinar are all part of setting up effective communication to alert everyone of any changes in the city's standards. Chapters 9 and 10 were modified off review cycle. The reasons for this will be discussed during each presentation section. This is the timeline for this year's review process. This is a similar process that we followed last year and how we'll continue operating moving forward. The cycle follows the city's fiscal year, but due to extensive changes this year, extended beyond the end of the fiscal year. The open comment period began in August. The city communicated the opening on the Houston Permitting Center website. Comments were compiled, summarized, and provided to the review cycle committee. The committee met over several months and a draft of the standards was created. From there, we met with external organizations for their input. The purpose of these meetings was to vet and coordinate all proposed changes before they were implemented. There is no design grace period for implementation of the City of Houston's 2023 edition of the IDM. For Houston Public Works capital improvement projects, 60% designs that are submitted for review on or after November 27, 2023 must comply with all standards in the 2023 IDM. For projects in the public or private sector, plans submitted for initial review on or after November 27th must comply with all standards in the 2023 IDM. The city must receive substantially complete plans before November 27th to be grandfathered under the 2022 standards. For additional background, refer to the 2023 IDM announcement and IDM executive summary. The IDM executive summary is provided at the beginning of the IDM document and gives implementation information for the IDM, standard specifications, and standard details. If applicants have submitted a project before November 27, 2023 and would like to use the 2023 requirements, the existing project should be canceled and a new project submitted. Revisions may be accepted in lieu of cancellations if specific criteria is met. This criteria will be posted as an announcement on the HPC website shortly. Directions on how to cancel plans can be found in the 2023 IDM announcement. The members of this year's internal committee are listed here. We asked for representatives from each Houston Public Works service line and the planning department. These representatives are asked to keep their service line updated during the review. Once the city has developed a draft document of all the proposed changes, we work with external partners to gather additional input. Before we move on, let's talk about the website briefly. All the items discussed today can be found on the city's Design and Construction Standards website. An easy way to find the website is by Googling City of Houston Design and Construction Standards. And this is what the website looks like. Next, I will be going over the general changes for the 2022-2023 review cycle. You can find red lines for all changes online. There is also a revision bar in our standards to easily identify updates. This review cycle, we have incorporated change bars on our final documents. The change bars are located on the left side of the page to indicate that something has changed to the right of the bar. Chapters 15 through 18 are now organized into sections to help streamline navigation throughout the chapters. Each title in the table of contents is also hyperlinked to its designated location. Clicking on any of the links in the table of contents takes you directly to that paragraph, figure, or table. We also continued adding placeholders within the chapter. While navigating through pages, you can now look to the top left corner to see the paragraph reference of the previous paragraph without the need to return to the previous page. We've added new definitions that were not in the previous version of the IDM. Also, we have combed through the chapters in this year's review cycle and ensured that only proper nouns and defined terms are capitalized. That concludes our general changes. We won't be answering questions at this time, but you're welcome to enter your questions in the chat and we'll answer them at the end of the webinar if time allows. Now, Nasib Hanna will present on chapters 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 12, and 13.
Thank you, Mary. Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for attending this webinar. My name is Nasif Hanna with the Design and Construction Standard Group, and I will be going over the changes in chapter 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 12, and 13 for the 2022-2023 review cycle. These chapters that I just mentioned are not officially part of the 2022-2023 review cycle, but due to some major changes in other chapters from the review cycle, some changes have been made to these chapters. In chapter 1 for general requirements, chapter 16 used to be titled Miscellaneous. Then, since this chapter is updated to be a standalone communication facility chapter, tree protection requirements previously in chapter 16 have been moved from chapter 16 to chapter 1. As you see, that section 3 was added for tree protection as shown. And due to adding section 3 for the tree protection to this chapter, references to the City of Houston Code of Ordinance to the tree protection were added in paragraph 1.1.02.a. Telecommunication facility requirements in chapter 16 were updated as part of the review cycle. So telecommunication geospatial data deliverable requirement were updated and added to paragraph 1.2.02.E.3 to align with the review cycle update. In Chapter 2 for survey requirement, due to frequent third-party damage to the city's underground infrastructure, language was added to clarify in which instances survey guidelines are required. In Chapter 3 for graphic requirements, due to changes and the new requirement which were added to the telecommunication facility in Chapter 16, graphic requirements for telecommunication facility were added to Section 2 of this chapter. Also, graphic requirements for aerial utility were also added to aid contractors to identify owners of the utilities. In Chapter 5 for easement requirement, the requirements for combined storm and sanitary sewers easement were mistakenly omitted from the 2022 IDM. So these requirements were added in Section 2 of this chapter. In Chapter 6 for utility locations, explanation for private project were added, in which the city requests a quality level A, B, or C of subsurface utility exploration when underground utility, trenchless construction, or excavation is performed. The requirement of quality level of subsurface utility exploration are explained as follows. If the proposed underground utility has a horizontal or vertical clearance less than what is required in the IDM, a quality level A of subsurface utility exploration is required to grant a variance for utility clearance. For underground trenchless construction, crossing existing public utility within 10 feet vertical distance, a quality level A or B of subsurface utility exploration is required to confirm the location of the existing public utility. For project excavation equal to 3 feet or deeper, a topographical survey equivalent to a quality level C of subsurface utility exploration is required. In Chapter 12 for street cut requirements, again, due to the increased instances of third-party damage to the city underground infrastructure, requirements for plan and profile for excavation greater than or equal to 3 feet in depth were added. In Chapter 13 for geospatial data deliverable, to follow continuity from update in Chapter 1, geospatial data deliverable requirements for telecommunication facility were updated and added to Section 4 of this chapter. That concludes the update and the changes in Chapter 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 12, and 13. If anyone has any questions on these changes, please ask those questions on the chat box.
Thank you, Nassif. So let me check. Before asking questions from the attendees, I'm going to ask a few frequently asked questions. So the first question is, do all utility lines in roadway need to be shown in drawing, even if the proposed underground telecommunication facility is not crossing or close to them?
Yes, that is in paragraph 3.2.11.8.2, which is specifying that all utility lines located on both sides of the roadway must be shown, regardless of the location of the proposed telecommunication line relative to the roadway. The exception only for this is for the above-ground telecommunication utility. So the underground utility lines are not required to be shown in this case.
Thank you. Next question. Do driveway projects require subsurface utility exploration?
No, driveway projects do not require this.
Is a subsurface utility exploration quality level A required if the proposed utility is parallel to the existing utility?
Yes, a quality level A is required at intervals of every 500 feet within the limit where there is less than sufficient horizontal clearance as indicated by the quality level B, C, or D.
Thank you. What is required to be provided on a subsurface utility exploration level A report?
A precise horizontal and vertical location of utilities obtained by actual exposure is required. A brief explanation of level A of subsurface utility exploration is provided as mentioned on chapter 6. Also, subsurface utility exploration deliverable requirements for telecommunication facility can be found in chapter 16.
Okay, another question. Why are subsurface utility explorations being enforced by the city now?
As I mentioned, that the city underground infrastructure has been damaged by third-party contractors who are installing private utilities in the right of way. And Houston Water has had numerous damages in the water lines. So they have requested to add subsurface utility exploration in the IDM to protect our infrastructure.
Okay. How do we submit a SU report to the city?
Subsurface utility exploration report will be submitted with plans in the document folder during the plan review process or with variance requests whenever required.
Thank you, Nasif. I think we haven't received any questions from public. Let me check. So there's one question here. Are the surface features showing in the construction drawings required to be shown with a high spatial accuracy, GPS or survey? For example, manholes, hydrant, outlet. Mary, is this something you want to respond, or Gilbert?
You know, in order to provide a complete response, I want to check back with the team. We'll provide the response in the Q&A that will be posted on the website after the webinar.
Okay, thank you. So, thank you, Mary, and thank you, Nasif.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is Mr. Otam Bertel from Office of City Engineer. So Otam will present changes made to Chapter 9, Stormwater Design and Water Quality Requirements.
Thank you, Sahar. Good afternoon. My name is Uttam Burtel, supervising engineer with Stormwater Group. Thank you for the introduction and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. I will be presenting to everyone the changes to the requirements in Chapter 9 of the IDM. The changes and updates are mainly focused on detention volume calculations for residential projects. Moving on to the next one. So this slide talks about the summary of the major changes you will see in Chapter 9. The changes and updates are related to the detention portion of the storm sewer design for residential projects. 3 detention tables are created in IDM 2023 to simplify the detention volume calculations. We will be discussing the major changes regarding these tables in next few slides. Going into the next one. Here we will be talking about the detention volume calculations, which are now presented in tabular forms to make it clear and easier for our customers. New updates are highlighted on your screen. I will now talk about these updates, which are highlighted in your screen. The first table we call as table 9.3 has been created for detention volume calculations for a tract containing only one single family residential home. This table cannot be used if the replat shows multiple lots. So this table is intended if there is a tract which shows only one lot and a homeowner is trying to build only one single family house. The first 2 rows in this table are existing detention requirements. These rows are for tracts with one single family home up to 15,000 square feet tract size. The third and fourth rows in table 9.3 are the new addition from IDM 2022. Now, one single family home on a tract over 15,000 square feet will also receive detention exemption up to 9750 square feet of total impervious area, which means if a homeowner is trying to build a house in a tract which is still above 15,000 square feet, detention is not required up to the total impervious area, which is up to 9750 square feet. We only will be asking detention for impervious area, which is in excess of 9750 square feet. The definition of total impervious area has been added to provide clarity. Now, total impervious area we define as existing plus proposed impervious area. So 9750 will imply to existing plus proposed impervious area. Going on to the next one. Here we will talk about table 9.4. The second table 9.4 is for tracts with single family residential developments with direct driveway access, joint access, shared access, courtyard access drive, or multi-unit residential development. This table is used for tracts containing multiple lots. The first 2 rows are existing detention requirements. These rows are for tracts up to 15,000 square feet. The third and fourth rows are for the tracts within 15,000 square feet and 1 acre. These tracts will receive a proportionality divided 9750 square feet of detention exemption. If a total impervious area is above 9750 square feet, then detention is required at a 0.75 acre feet per acre rate. In other words, let's say if there is a tract with 2 lots, so 9750 square feet of impervious credit should be splitted between these 2 lots. And detention will be credited up to 9750 for each lot after they are splitted equally in this example, which I just gave it to you. The last rows shows that any tract at or over 1 acre requires detention for all proposed impervious areas. The requirements and rates are listed in table 9.5. Here I will talk about the major updates that are called out under the notes section for table 9.4. As per IDM 2023, any project that is based on table 9.4, all the lots within the track must have a shear outfall. So this is the new addition which will be applicable for projects implementing table 9.4. A minimum of 24-inch RCP shared connection is required with a separate plan and profile project submitted to Office of City Engineer for storm outfall approval. So 24-inch RCP is an standard outfall connection, but we have added alternative outfall options for track up to 15,000 square feet. So a Texas licensed PE is required to justify using a 4-inch connection via curb and 12-inch to roadside ditch. This option is only available if the curb or ditch is directly fronting these developments. So in other words, let's say for track up to 15,000 square feet, we won't ask for plan and profile as long as a Texas PE will be verifying using a 4-inch and 12-inch connection to roadside ditch. A public alley created with a recorded plat before January 1st, 2023 is exempt from detention requirements. So this is the last table, which is table 9.5, is the tabulated version of commercial project requirements for detention. Any projects not subjected to table 9.3 and table 9.4 will implement table 9.5. The requirements in this table are the same requirements based on the 2022 IDM for commercial projects. So this table will be implied for all projects not subjected to table 9.3 and 9.4. In other words, we do for our commercial projects. So the commercial requirements has not been changed. It is still the same from IDM 2022. The proposed percent impervious is the proposed impervious area over disturbed area. This part has been added to provide clarity to our customers when they are trying to come up with percent impervious. So this concludes the summary of changes to chapter 9 in the IDM 2023. We are now open to any questions you all have.
Thank you, Tom. Before asking the questions from the attendees, I'm going to go over a few of the frequently asked questions. We have a frequently asked question of, can my SFR property under 15,000 square feet still be NA by the storm department with the new 2023 IDM?
Yes. A project under 15,000 square feet can be NA'd with the projects following table 9.3. In other words, they need to still be less than 65% impervious, and track size should be still less than 15,000 square feet.
Another one is, does my SFR property over 15,000 square feet need to have a storm review given my total impervious area is below 9,750 square feet?
Yes. The requirements in IDM 2023 is mainly focused on detention requirements only. Other components of drainage design is still required and has to be reviewed by storm department.
And then we have, will the commercial project get the detention exemption provided under table 9.3 and 9.4?
No, like I said earlier in my presentation slide, so the detention exemption are only for the residential projects. For commercial projects at this time, the requirements are still the same from IDM 2022. So, the requirements for detention will be still the same, and there is no any exemption at this time.
Okay, those are the frequently asked questions. I will go double check the chat to make sure there are no other questions from the public. Okay, it seems like we have one here, Tom. Will credit be granted for existing impervious cover when redeveloping a site? The person asked this because they couldn't read the chart.
Okay, so this is very important questions at this time, and our management is currently working on this part. So I don't have an answer to give to our customer. We will get back to our customer once we have the answer. All of our customers are, welcome to send us an email, to our Storm department or reach out to myself or my team if they have any questions.
Okay. We do have another question here, Utam, and they asked, so a tract over 15,000 square feet with existing impervious over 9,750 square feet, that will be adding a room. Will that need to detain only what is being disturbed, resulting on impervious cover?
Yes, that's true. So for a project, let's say the existing impervious for a residential project is already above 9750 square feet. In that case, we will be only axing detention for the proposed impervious area. So our customers should be focused on proposed scope of work, which is any proposed impervious at that time only will require detention.
Okay, I believe we have another question here. If my shared access project is using the alternative outfall option, do I still need a catch basin under the access driveway?
Yes, this is very good question actually. So alternative outfall options, all of our customers should be aware. This is only available up to 15,000 square feet of track size. So the idea here is, Texas licensed PE has to do the outfall analysis to show a 4-inch pipe in front of Corbin Gutter Street or 12-inch schedule 40 pipe in front of roadside ditch street is still capable to hold the runoff discharge coming out of the proposed development. So yes, the good way of doing it is to do a catch basin just inside the private property next to the outfall and release it with the help of 4-inch schedule 40 pipe if it is fronting the Corbin Gutter Street. Otherwise, do 12-inch schedule 40 pipe if it is fronting the roadside ditch street.
Okay, we have another question here, Utam. Will table 9.3 be affected if there are two SRFs instead of one in a tract greater than 15,000 square feet?
So, FOSS table 9.3 clearly says in the title, it is applicable only when there is one single family house. When the question says when a customer is trying to do single family house, so it will automatically will be reviewed under table 9.4. So all the requirements stated for table 9.4 and the notes applicable for table 9.4 will be used to review the project.
Okay, we have another question here. Where would the project fall when it comes to providing detention, if any, for a property being replat into individual lots for SFR?
Can you repeat the question, please, Jose?
Sure. They asked, where would a project fall when it comes to providing detention, if any, for a property being replatted into individual lots for SFR?
Okay, like I said, the first table 9.3 is only applicable when there is no replat or when the plat only shows one lot or it has not been splitted into multiple lots. So table 9.3 is only for a criteria where a homeowner is trying to build one house. So the plat or replat shows only one property without multiple lots within that tract. Now, when it comes to multiple lots within the track, um, it should automatically will be reviewed under table 9.4. So 9.4 means a shared outfall is required. A detention exemption up to 9750 square feet is allowed for single family residential property with direct driveway access, which we also call front loader, shared access, joint access. There are two new kind of developments being proposed in IDM at this time. We can get more information in Code of Ordinance chapter 42 as well. They are multi-unit residential and courtyard style development. So all these projects will be reviewed under table 9.4. So the simpler way of understanding this is, if your replat or the plat shows multiple lots, multiple means more than one, automatically table 9.4 has to be used to design and submit the project to City of Houston.
Okay. There is a couple more questions, Tom. One of
Go
them
ahead.
is the alternative outfall pipe size fixed to 4 inches and 12 inches sizes, or other sizes between 4-inch minimum to 12-inch max can be analyzed?
So this is very good question. So at this time, we only have provided 2 pipe sizes. These are, again, some part was adapted from IDM 2022. So 4-inch schedule 40 pipe, we have been allowing our customer with single family residential development fronting curb and gutter street. The key is these developments should front these storm sewer in front of it. 4-inch is always designed when there is curb and gutter street. 12-inch schedule 40 pipe is designed when there is roadside ditch fronting this property.
Okay. The next question is, if my shared access project is using the alternative outfall option, do I still need to catch bait? Oh, I think that one was already asked, right?
Yes,
Do I
yes,
still
I
need
think,
it?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, the next one is, will adding impervious cover over existing impervious cover trigger detention?
So at this time, like I said earlier, our management is working towards this particular topic. Based on current manual, yes, detention is required because we go based on disturbed area resulting in impervious cover. When saying this, I'd like to, wait for that answer. Once we have the answers from our management, we will get to our customers to relay this information. Thank you.
For SFR projects needing detention, and we choose to do a swale for detention, what will be the minimum offset from the lot line?
So these are project specific questions. I would say, refer to our IDM chapter 9. If there, my team or myself, we can go into details and reply that questions. Thank you.
Okay. We have another question here. Can a swale be used for table 9.4 if we are under the 65% exemption?
So now when you are below 65%, it means indirectly it means you don't require detention. So swale can be used as a method of conveying runoff from your downspouts from your property all the way to the right of way and connect through 4-inch or schedule 40 pipe. Yes, it can be used.
Okay, it seems like at this time there aren't any questions in the chat, and if some come up later on, we can answer that later. But thank you, Tom. Our next presenter is Mr. Ahmed Ghali from the Office of the City Engineer, Traffic, Mobility, and the Right-of-Way Group. Ahmed will be presenting the changes made to Chapter 10, the street, paving, and design requirements. Ahmed, I'm not sure if your mic is muted or not.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today, I will share with you small changes in Chapter 10, events of cycle chapter, regarding 2 items. First item is the alleys, and the second item is the street widening. I will start with the alleys. Start with confirming that the alleys is part of the right-of-way owned and managed by the city, and the alleys either private maintained alleys or city maintained alleys. There is a list online for the list of the alleys maintained by the city, and today just the changes are coming to the private maintained alleys. For city maintained alleys, they are allowed to be used by either commercial or residential access. If there is any improvement proposed for city maintained alleys, it must be following the city street standards. The changes coming for the private alleys. Private maintained alleys are allowed only for commercial for residential use, not for commercial use. And in the past, we were asking for plan and profile if you are proposing any improvement in the private maintained areas. Would like to make it easy on the residents and applicants. Instead of plan and profile, now we ask for cross section every 20 feet to show us the certain the surface elevations, and to make sure that the stormwater will be going in the right direction. However, any improvement must follow the requirements for chapter 9 of the manual. If there is any proposed underground utilities, we will ask for plan and profile. In both cases will be signed and sealed by a professional engineer registered in the state of Texas. New alleys, talk about the existing alleys, either privately maintained or city maintained. For all new alleys, regardless, it must be following the city standards for street design. And also it must follow requirements in chapter 10 of the manual regarding stormwater drainage, and it must have plan and profile. For the street, the second item we changed also in chapter 10 is the street widening. In the past, we only request to widen the street if it's shared driveway for multi-unit developments. Now we ask to widen the street regardless if it's a shared driveway or front loader driveways for multi-units. However, there is some requirements that treat it much easier right now. If it's a residential development is less than 15,000 feet, we will not ask you to widen the street. And or if the frontage of the lot is less than 25% of the entire length of the block, will not ask you to widen the street. I think that would make it much easier, right? So these two items are small items in chapter 10 to clarify the usage of the alleys for access as access points, and changes in the requirements for street widening. So I'm here to answer any question you may have.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. Before answering questions from the attendees, I'm going to ask a few frequently asked questions. So the first question is, are no parking signs required for streets between 18 and 19 feet in width?
Yes, this would be a requirement, yes.
Okay, another question. With the new changes, can we still apply for variances?
Sure, we're always open to receive variances. And as I said, the IDM, I'd like to repeat that, it's just guidelines, and we will always deal with variances. However, just variance, if it has technical justification, we're very open for it and discuss it. But just please make sure, sure that the variance is not based on cost or finance.
Okay, next question. Is OC plan and profile required for new alley access?
For the new ones, yes. New ones must follow the street requirements, and yes, it must submit plan and profile signed and sealed by a registered professional engineer in the state of Texas.
Good. So I haven't received any question from public. Is there anything you want to add? I mean, major things about this chapter, the changes made to this chapter?
No, just the two things, because I said it's chapter 10 of cycle. So that's the two things that we thought that will be very important to add in this update.
Okay, thank you, Ahmed.
Thank you.
Changes made to Chapter 15, traffic and signal design requirements will be presented in 3 parts. The first part will be presented by Mr. Ian Lavacek from Multimodal Safety and Design Branch.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Sahar. So yes, I will be presenting some of the changes in Chapter 15, Traffic and Signal Design Requirements. You'll hear again from Ahmed Gailey to talk a little bit about some driveway issues, and Mazen Abdul Razak will join us near the end to talk about some signal timing changes. So we're doing a team effort on this chapter. So I will start with a few of our early parts of Chapter 15. Chapter 15, if you will recollect, deals with most of the traffic-related issues in the IDM. This could be traffic studies, this could be traffic counts, it could be traffic impact analyses. It also deals with very specific traffic infrastructure, such as signage, traffic signals, traffic control plans. So I'll be talking mostly about some of the study information that we're looking at. And before I get into the details, I wanted to give an overview of some of the general changes that we're making. The first change is just a terminology change. Previously in our traffic engineering reports, we referred to level of service. What we always meant by that was the vehicle level of service. And so we're just clarifying that now. We're also understanding, based on national best practice, that there are other modes of transportation that we value as well. And so we want to clarify that vehicle level of service is not the only level of service that we worry about, but it will remain an important one. And the definition of that does not change. It's still the same level of service, just now you'll see a lot more of these V's for the vehicle level of service. Generally, we also have, you'll see a few more changes throughout the chapter that we won't talk about in detail here. Some rearrangements of the sections just for readability, legibility, and for clarification. We're hoping to make the whole IDM clearer and clearer every iteration, and I think that's what you'll see in some of these changes, hopefully. There is one brand new concept that we'll be introducing today. We are calling this multimodal service standards. What this is, these are not actually any new standards. These are just a framework for understanding how priorities are set on the streets. These will help where there might have been gray areas in the past about trade-offs. These will help make those decisions more clear, hopefully cutting down on review times and helping everybody along the way so there's not lots of back and forth. And I said, these are not new standards. They are, I got a couple of pictures on this slide and the next, kind of highlighting some of the elements that we are now giving guidance for when we want to see things like different pedestrian realm elements, different kinds of bike facilities. Multimodal service standards are prepared for both corridors and at intersections. They're basically two different sets with two different expectations. And those two different tables for corridors and intersections are much more attuned to the scope of the project. So these will impact anything that impacts the public right-of-way, which will include, of course, development projects, also large-scale capital improvement projects. What we've really tried to do is give the guidance in a way that is very tied in with the scope of the project. All of these service standards are intended to be in the public right-of-way. That is a point of emphasis for the IDM. This is a public right-of-way manual. We're not looking for making any changes on private property through the IDM, although we do reference code of ordinances from time to time. But from this section, these will be public right-of-way impacts. And I've listed them all out here. These are the kinds of things that are included in multimodal service standards. These are things like pedestrian realm, everything behind the curb where people walk, but also where there are utilities, where we have a lot of needs for that space. Including things like sidewalks, bike facilities, bus stops, curb ramps. We want to look more carefully at intersection corridor radii, and features called curb extensions that we'll talk a little bit more about in Chapter 17. We'll also be looking for help on pavement markings, pedestrian push buttons at signals, pedestrian signal heads, bicycle signal heads, and pedestrian signal timing. We are trying to be very clear about the scope that we are expecting for every project. And so the tables that are provided in the chapter now are very nuanced. So we don't provide them all here, but the intent is that we are working with projects that are already working within the public right of way and helping give guidance for what to construct in the public right of way that's aligned with the scope of the project. We're not looking at adding any costs here. This is more about helping set priorities for costs that have already been assumed for a project. The implementation of multimodal service standards has propagated through to other parts of this chapter. This will be a relatively a change that might be unexpected. So on the left, this is for our traffic impact analyses. We have the older table that was much more of a clear designation for level of service, or what we're now calling vehicle level of service. That's what's on the left, where if you had, we would have ask you to look at the level of service, vehicle level of service for existing conditions, background, projected and mitigation, and we would give you very specific requirements for what vehicle level service to mitigate back to. We still largely follow that, but now our new flow chart that's shown on the right is hopefully providing a little bit more nuance. I won't go into the details today, but basically it has the same general requirements for vehicle level of service that existed previously, but it gives other ways of mitigating in ways that we find acceptable, building on the multimodal service standards. Hopefully this will allow us to really think through what are the improvements that we need to ask for to handle the demand placed on our public infrastructure by private developments in a very nuanced fashion. So that's a very brief overview. There's a lot more information in the chapter with a lot more specifics, and we understand that the details here really do matter. And so we do want to offer a separate webinar where we will go into detail for these multimodal service standards and how they apply for lots of different kinds of projects, developments, intersection projects, how we're thinking about that and how we think that these can be a tool for the success of your project. That webinar will be on April 17th. You can register here and you can also scan the QR code there. I'll hold it here just for a second, and we'll try to also get this known in other forums as well. But we'll really try to get some examples here to show people about what kind of documentation we're looking for, and really try to make your project as successful as possible. So in addition to that effort, we have rethought through our section that was previously called Traffic Engineering Study for Design. We are now calling it Traffic and Design Studies. This is a section that we did not find to be very largely used previously, and it provided a lot of confusion and a lot of back and forth. What we've really tried to do here is be very specific for the kinds of documentation that we need to make sure a project is successful. So whenever we're doing things like building new roads or changing the traffic control, like adding signals or stop signs, or we're changing roadway configurations by adding or removing lanes, we like to document all of that fully and document it in a way that we can communicate to lots of stakeholders and do public engagement. So we have dramatically enhanced this section and given a lot more guidance for when these kinds of studies will be useful. I'll note that it does complement but does not supersede a traffic impact analysis. So this should be, our hope is that this is fully compatible with the TIA process for private developments. TIA, some of the studies in here will be useful for private developments. We've added emphasis for safety and crash analyses for a lot of our studies. And again, we're trying to ensure that project decisions are fully documented for the longevity of the project. The way we have thought through this section is we have defined a series of project scopes, which I've shown on the left. And then we have a lot of interchangeable study modules shown on the right. And we have very clear guidance in the chapter for how to link these together. But the first step would be to identify your project scope. So if this is a roadway corridor construction project, intersection construction, if it's traffic signals, pedestrian crossings, bike lanes, or safety studies, we define what each of those mean. And then each of those will have their own requirements for the different modules that are shown on the right. So, and we define what would go into those modules: safety analyses, corridor and access management analysis, intersection design and traffic control analysis, intersection vehicle level of service analysis, pedestrian crossing analysis, and traffic signal warrant analysis. Most of these kinds of documentations and studies were previously required, but we're much more clear about when they're required now and how to use them. A few more minor changes in Chapter 15 before I pass it on to Ahmed. We have a little more guidance for the kinds of information we're looking for traffic volumes and traffic counts. This is the section that defines what kind of data we are looking for at the city to approve different kinds of studies. And we've been using 13-hour turning movement counts at intersections. These have gotten a lot more affordable. And what this gives us, it allows us to look at the AM hours, peak hours, PM peak hours, and noon peak hours and off-peak hours. We like to also include pedestrian and bicycle because that influences a lot of our different studies in the study module. And then for most of our urban city, we are finding that the traffic growth rates are not nearly as high as they are in the greenfield suburban areas, which I think feels reasonable. We're finding at most of our built out areas have a growth rate of about 1 to 2% per year. In a lot of areas, it's a lot less than that. And when we really like to push to that level of understanding what the growth actually is in an area. So we provided a little guidance on that. We've added a little bit of guidance for our blue tiles in town. These are the street address tiles that you'll see in a lot of the older parts of town. They are beloved by the community, and they're useful for actually wayfinding as well. And so what we've done in this chapter is provided guidance for how we expect them to be maintained and preserved, and a coordination process to follow when these are encountered and might be impacted by a construction project. And we have included a little bit of language in Chapter 15 in our section for traffic control plans for pedestrian, bicycle, and transit facilities. We have a lot more details about how pedestrians, transit, and bicyclists can be detoured in Chapter 17, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, but we're trying to get that unified throughout our IDM. And that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Just a reminder, thank you, Ian. Just a reminder, if anyone has any questions, please ask those questions in the chat box. We will be responding to those questions at the end of the Chapter 15 portion of the presentation. And as Ian mentioned, our next presenter is Mr. Ahmed Ghali from the Office of City Engineer, and Ahmed will continue to discuss the updates made to Chapter 15.
Good afternoon again. And Chapter 15, just this portion of Chapter 15, I'm going to talk about it today. It's reflection of the changes in Chapter 42 of the ordinance. As all of us are aware, there are so many changes in Chapter 42, and including some driveways, and that I'm going to speak with you today about. In the past, till 2020, 2023, we had only two categories, either residential or commercial driveways. As Chapter 42 changes, we added a new category. Now we have category A, B, and C. A represents the single family residential driveway. C is a commercial as used to be. Now we have the new categories type B. Type B reflects whatever they are coming up with right now in our colleagues in the planning department for MUR or multi-unit residential developments. And Table 15.6, it used to be just two portion in the past. Now we inserted the type B in the middle right now. Type A doesn't have much changes except the width of the driveway went down from 12 feet width as minimum to 10, and maximum used to be 24 and still 24 as it is. Category C, it stays the same. There's no changes there. For category B, as you see right now, the table in front of you, that it has its own dimensions as well, but it still have the minimum and maximum radius for safety for the turning vehicles. And this figure coming from chapter 42, the livable places, please visit it and read about it. And there's different configurations where category V will be applicable for multi-units. This table also has been modified for the, so it's three main variables, three variables that changing. For type A, distance from the right of way, if it's corner lot, stay the same as 20. And maximum number of driveways will be 2. Driveways maximum for any single family home. For type B, the distance from the right of way will be, it depends on the side, how many lots on the development. If it's less than 20, the minimum distance from the right of way will be 30. And if it's more than 20 lots, as you see, it will be 40. However, there is no maximum number of driveways. So to make sure that you have sufficient and efficient inner circulation for the development. And still the minimum radius for the curb is 4 feet. It's one really here highlighted comment, as you see it below there, that no gravel, no sand, no bricks, no alternative material except new sod around the junction box in the open space in the right of way. One of the benefits from this, not allowing any other material except sod, just to prevent any parking in the right of way, what we call it the parking pad. For category C, as C for the commercial driveway placement, if you have the distance from the property line for the commercial, as in the past it was one typo, we change it, and the column D for commercial, if you only have one driveway, the minimum spacing should be not applicable. In the past, we had it as a typo, just 40 feet. So we fixed it in this update. Please just, I'm asking you kindly, please go back and read the chapter 42. There's a lot of changes, and I'm sure there will be some questions come up. And I will ask you kindly, please bear with us. That's in new requirements. Everyone will need learning curve to apply it. And at the end, I will say, yes, we are open for variances, and like always do. And variances should be based on technical reasons only, not cost or anything. And we'll work with you as we always do. Thank you. Now I'll hand it to our colleague in Star, Mr. Yasin Abdulrazak.
Thank you, Ahmed. Just want to reiterate again, if anyone has any questions, please type it in the chat box and they will be discussed at the end of the chapter 15 presentation. As Ahmed said, our next presenter is Mr. Mazen Abdulrazak from Houston TransStar. Mazen will be presenting the changes made to traffic signal requirements in chapter 15.
Thank you, Jose. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to go over the changes in the 2022-2023 Infrastructure Design Manual. Review cycles as it relates to traffic signal. There are 4 traffic signal related items that had some changes in them this review cycle. The first item is the left turn phasing guidelines. The left turn phasing analysis requirement in itself have not really changed and remained the same as those in the 2017 IDM edition. What we changed was the method of evaluation, the left turn operation. The new method follows the traffic signal timing manual 2nd edition guidelines. It is in a flowchart format, which is very easy to follow for both the design engineers and the city reviewers. The second item is detection. The City of Houston is reintroducing the video detection, as known as VIVIDs, to replace the wireless magnetometers. We have about 400 intersections, signalized intersections, that we implemented wireless magnetometers, and we're having some issue with them. So the wireless magnetometers technology did not really deliver what it had promised. We have experienced several issues with this technology, such as failing batteries, lack of accuracy in volume and occupancy counts, and other issues such as interference and design, signal strength. In addition to that, video detection technology has made remarkable advances in the recent years and has proven to be very effective, especially in detecting bicycles. The third item I have to discuss here today is the leading pedestrian and leading bike intervals. As part of the City of Houston Vision Zero, and to introduce more safety measure to vulnerable road user, such as pedestrian and cyclist, a leading pedestrian and a leading bike intervals are required now in areas where we have high crashes and in areas where we have high volume of pedestrian and cyclists. The last item that saw changes in the IDM in this review cycle is the fiber optic cable. As we all know, the fiber optic cable network in the City of Houston is very limited. And in order for us to expand that, we introduce a couple of things here. The first one is that we require the fiber optic cable to extend if there is a fiber optic cable within 1,500 feet of the signalized intersection, whether it's a new signalized intersection or it's a signalized intersection that's being updated and upgraded. The second item is if there is a fiber optic cable exists within one signalized intersection. So if we are building or upgrading an existing signalized intersection, or we actually installing a new signal, and the next intersection actually is run on fiber, that fiber cable has to extend to this signalized intersection with complete regard to distances. So it doesn't matter within 1,500 feet or 5,000 feet. We ask that this cable is extended to the intersection. So this concludes the traffic signal portion, and I believe the entire Chapter 15 review cycles and changes done. We would be happy to answer any questions. If you have any questions, please leave those questions in the chat box. Once again, thank you for giving us the opportunity to share this information with you.
Thank you, Mazen. Before answering questions from the attendees, I'm going to ask a few frequently asked questions. Ian, Ahmed, or Mazen, if either one of you feel comfortable answering these frequently asked questions, please do so. One of the questions is a circular driveway allowed for single-family homes?
Ahmed, I think that touches on driveways. You want to handle that one? Well, as Ahmed might be having technical difficulty. Yes, circular driveways.
Yes, I can. My mic. Go ahead, please, again. Ian, do you hear me?
Yes, Ahmed, we can hear you. But the question was, is circular driveways allowed for single-family homes?
Yes, it is.
Another question is, are parking pads allowed in the right-of-way?
No, actually, no.
Another one is gravel allowed for temporary driveway approaches for plan review?
A gravel for temporary? Yes, we allow it, yes.
Another question is, does the new changes apply for remove and replace driveways in kind, and what is the minimum driveway width allowed?
Yes, it should applicable for the replace in kind. And what's the second part of the question?
What is the minimum driveway width allowed?
10 feet. Just I'm glad we'll go for the gravel. It depends, temporary, what the definition of temporary driveway. That it depends on it. If we can gravel or not. Sometimes we allow a gravel, and if it's for very short term for certain purposes. Otherwise, the approach must be concrete or asphalt.
Next question is the 8-foot culvert distance between driveways within the same lot still allowed for duplexes?
The 8 feet one?
Is the 8-foot culvert distance between driveways within the same lot still allowed for duplexes?
It's the same lot. We can go the table right now. The minimum distance between two driveways, the minimum is 10 feet for one-way system for residential. So if you apply this requirement as the table, 8 feet should not be allowed. But for different lots, yes.
Thank you, Ahmed. We're gonna be going through some of the questions that the public has asked. And one of the questions is the past temporary dots are placed during construction in a way that was dangerous for petacyclists? Has that been addressed?
I can take that. I think what the requester is referring to are temporary raised pavement markers that are installed as part of traffic control during construction. We do not specifically handle that. We do believe that is not widely used and may have been installed inadvertently in the past.
Another question is, what is the horizon year for the road reconstruction project for traffic study?
That's a good question. It'll depend on a couple of different things. If the road project comes in through a development project, all of that study year will be defined in the TIA process for build out. If it's part of a bigger roadway project that's coordinated with the city, that'll go through our process called a design concept report, and that has a lot of internal coordination. It's a little outside the scope of what we're talking about here, but that'll be determined collaboratively with city representation.
Okay. The next question is, if a TIA identifies multimodal or safety improvements needed based on existing conditions, who will be responsible for the cost of these improvements?
It depends on a lot of things. I think that's where our training might be coming in handy. Generally speaking, we are handling this the same way as if a TIA requires a new traffic signal or other major or other improvements to an intersection. If the new requirements require those multimodal kinds of improvements, they will be included at the same way.
Someone has posted, hello, perhaps my question is out of the scope about bus lanes. Have you studied the case of central busways with the bus running contraflow? The solution implemented in Chavez Avenue in Tbilisi. With many advantages, it allows also to implement easier bus priorities at traffic lights. It could be an interesting example for Westheimer Road.
Yeah, good question. I'm gonna have to look into that. I think what we're talking about here, I think you're right, it's outside of the particular scope of here. That actually might fall more within our Metropolitan Transit Agency, who leads the design of transit ways. We work collaboratively with them, but we do not define the standards for them.
One more question we'll ask before we move on. Will 13-hour TMCs be required at all study intersections or on only major intersections?
They're intended to be collected. There's no additional requirements for turning movement counts. This is just where previously turning movement counts were already required. We are now just requiring them to be 13-hour instead of just peak hour. So this is not, we're not expanding the scope or number of places where a turning movement count would be required.
Thank you, Ian, Mazen, and Ahmed. I just want to reiterate, if we didn't get to your questions right now, we will be answering them later on. But for right now, our next presenter is Mr. Gilbert Portillo from the Office of City Engineer, Water and Waste Telecommunications Permits and Plan Review. Gilbert will be presenting changes made to Chapter 16.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the introduction, Jose. I would like to thank everyone who worked together to complete all these revisions. I will be briefing everyone on the changes to Chapter 16 pertaining to communication facilities. One of the first major changes to Chapter 16 is the title has been changed to Communication Facility Requirements. The previous title was Miscellaneous. This chapter is for requirements related to telecommunications, and the title Communication Facility is a broader term that this chapter aims to govern. All other miscellaneous items were moved out from this chapter to other sections in the IDM to improve organization. I will cover some of those later this afternoon. Beginning with the table of contents, this chapter is divided into two main sections. The first section is an overview of communication facilities, which includes references and definitions. And the second section explains more of the technical aspects for communication facilities, which include design requirements, submittals, and quality assurance. Many details in this chapter are new or have been changed, clarified, or expanded. These include criteria defining a communication facility, article references, definitions, general requirements, expansion or new requirements, submittal requirements of drawings, analysis, and SU deliverables, and quality assurance. The first section defines the criteria of what is considered a communication facility in the public right-of-way. As a result, some of these items have been moved out of this chapter, such as tree protection to Chapter 1, residential subdivision markers and sky bridges to Chapter 18. With this change, Chapter 16 has an improved structure and focus on telecommunications. The criteria to be a communication facility was modified to include wireless or radio, cable and wireline facilities, ground equipment, and poles. Article references have been compiled and expanded under Section 16.1.02. Previously, a few references were made and scattered throughout the chapter. The list includes governing articles revolving around safety, structural, design, and deployment of communication facilities, such as AASHTO, the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, city ordinances, international building codes and associated city amendments, and Texas local government and utility codes. To prevent conflict between this chapter and applicable regulations, it is necessary to reference city, state, and standard codes that govern communication facilities. Many terms have been defined in Section 16.1.03 to be clear on what communication facilities include. The section was expanded to prevent a conflict between our infrastructure design manual and definitions from the Texas Local Government Code. The second section of this chapter is on communication facility general requirements. Subsections in 16.2.01.a emphasize specific compliance with federal, state, and local requirements, such as Texas Codes 283 and 284, Chapter 40 of the City of Houston Ordinance, and the Americans with Disabilities Act. Section 16.2.01.83 tells us what communication facilities need to be marked with. This is necessary in case the facility owner needs to be contacted by the city. Section 16.2.01.8 ensures efficiency of ITS devices and prevents bad effects on our traffic signals when non-traffic related devices are mounted to city infrastructure. It is also noted that approved non-traffic devices attached to city infrastructure may be removed in the future if it interferes with ITS or traffic signal communications. Clearances for at-ground or above-ground equipment have been made more clear in section 16.2.01.8.9. This is to distinguish requirements from underground facilities. If equipment is placed in a curb and gutter roadway, at least 2 feet clearance behind the curb is required. But if a roadway has a ditch, no at or above ground equipment is allowed within the ditch or between the ditch and the edge of the pavement. This requirement keeps protruding equipment away from the roadway and closer to the right-of-way line. The driveway and intersection clearances are similar as before, but specifically mentioned for poles and cabinets. Several other requirements on at or above ground communication facilities have been added to protect vehicular traffic and public safety, such as node and repeater installations that require at least a 250-foot radius from the traffic signals or ITS devices. If this isn't met, a zero interference study and variance must be submitted to the city engineer's office. A clearance of 1 feet from the edge of the sidewalk, and prohibiting facilities installed on Main Street. Placement of poles and cabinets installed on property lines in residential areas and on shared property lines that intersect with the public right-of-way in non-residential areas. And finally, prohibiting obstructing signs, ITS devices, and pole penetration within the public right-of-way. Next, network node attachments to poles have established elevation requirements to protect public and vehicular traffic. As such, they must be installed at least 12 feet above ground. If facing toward the street, then at least 18 feet above ground to the bottom of the node is required. Ground equipment can cause damages to public city utilities and have certain aesthetic conflicts. For this reason, section 16.2.01.e lays out some considerations for ground equipment placement, such as being least intrusive and outside of visibility triangles for safer traffic, being a neutral color and material compatible with surrounding structures, not being within a park or within 250 feet of a park boundary without approval, and to minimize density in the cases where existing ground equipment occupies 25 feet or more square feet and is within 300 feet of a proposed location, the city may deny approval of that. In section 16.2.01.c, additional requirements for node support or repeater poles were added to meet aesthetic requirements and prevent damage to city infrastructure. As such, clear zone requirements for poles include that no wooden poles should be located within the zone. New or substitution poles are required to be breakaway poles weighing less than 992 pounds as described in AASHTO specifications. Pole aesthetic requirements include blending in with surrounding poles by matching their style and color. If a pole is within a design or historic district, it must meet their requirements. If pole types inconsistent with height or color are to be within 1,000-foot radius of each other, then city approval is required prior to submitting plans to the city engineer's office. Continuing with node support or repeater pole requirements, additional requirements were added to be more straightforward. If a right-of-way is more than 50 feet wide and has a commercial side, the pole needs to be placed on that side. The poles need to be at a minimum 15 feet away from pedestrian ramps and 10 feet away from nearby driveways. Replacement or reinforcement of poles will be replaced by providers if it's structurally inadequate. and the city prefers utility poles and city-owned service poles to be used for supporting installations. The next section added was for network pole load analysis, as some poles may not be safe to support new devices. For this reason, requirements in section 16.2.01.d have been added to define criteria for design analysis of poles supporting proposed devices. An analysis may be done in accordance with IBC, AASHTO, or other relevant codes, but you must take the following into consideration. The structural elements for the pole, such as the base plate and concrete foundation, and wind speed. An analysis report must be provided with a summary. This will verify that all structural elements and dimensions of the pole are adequate to withstand loads, stresses, and fatigue at a minimum. Another section added to Chapter 16 was underground facilities. Section 16.2.01.f relates to underground facilities such as fiber optic cables and conduits. The main changes are providing field surveys and meeting subsurface utility exploration requirements. And you can refer to Chapter 2 for survey requirements and Chapter 6 for SUE requirements. These requirements were mentioned earlier this afternoon. Also, you must provide 4 feet horizontal clearance from nearby utilities and now 3 feet vertical clearance for crossing utilities. It was originally 2 feet vertical clearance in previous editions. These changes have been made to verify all existing utilities underground and to address utility damage concerns that our utility operators have been dealing with. Our operators have had over 600 combined cases where telecom companies have hit our public infrastructure, causing delays in services to the public and costly repairs. Section 16.2.02 provides requirements for submissions, such as drawings, in order to ensure the quality of the projects being approved meets those standards. Depending on the project type, a pole load analysis or SUE report may be required. The deliverables are listed under each submittal category. Finally, section 16.2.03 has been added for reliable quality assurance. All reports and drawings will need to be signed by a licensed professional engineer in the state of Texas. The city may perform visual inspections of any of the equipment located in the public right-of-way at any time. That concludes the information on Chapter 16 changes for communication facilities in the 2023 edition of the IDM. Thank you all so much for your time today. If anyone has any questions on this chapter, please ask those questions in the chat box.
Thank you, Gilbert. So let's ask a few frequently asked questions. So the first one is, where can we find the other miscellaneous requirements that were previously in this chapter?
Great question, Sahar. Other miscellaneous requirements were moved to different chapters as mentioned previously. Encroachment requirements in this chapter were moved to a brand new chapter, which will be covered later this afternoon. And tree protection requirements were moved to Chapter 1.
Good. The next question is, why is the vertical clearance requirement 3 feet now?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, this was proposed as a result of several telecom conduits hitting our existing infrastructure like water lines. And so we've had over 600 combined cases in the last few years of those incidents.
Thank you. Thank you. What if this design criteria conflicts with state requirements?
Well, that's a very good question. This chapter was vetted to ensure that it didn't conflict with any existing codes, but under certain under certain provisions in the state code, a municipality, which in this case is the city, is allowed to create its own design requirements, and that's what we intend to do with this chapter.
Great, thank you, Gilbert. So I haven't received any questions from public. Is there any other major topics you want to add?
Sure. On SUE deliverables, I know that is a new requirement. When folks, if they at a minimum they need to meet a SUE level B for these projects if they're within 10 feet of a public utility. If they cannot meet our standard clearance requirements, as I mentioned earlier, they're going to have to provide a SU level A with their variance report in order for us to consider and process that application.